Tonight, we examine one of Victorian London's most disturbing unsolved cases. Between 1887 and 1889, dismembered human remains were discovered along the River Thames. The victims were never identified, and the person responsible was never found. At the time, the crimes defied explanation, and even today, they resist resolution. History would come to know this series of discoveries as the Thames Torso Murders. This is not a story of a single crime, but of a pattern that emerged quietly, and a city that struggled to understand what it was seeing. The River Thames has always been central to London's existence. For centuries, it carried trade, people, and industry through the heart of the city, shaping both its growth and its identity. By the late 19th century, the river was no longer romanticized. It was crowded, polluted, and overused, a working artery rather than a scenic landmark. And yet, it remained essential. Between 1887 and 1889, the Thames revealed something far darker than commerce or waste. It began to give up human remains, not as complete bodies, but as fragments, carefully separated, deliberately concealed, and placed where the current could scatter evidence. What surfaced was only part of the story. What sank beneath the water was lost forever. London in the 1880s was a city under strain. Its population had exploded, and entire neighborhoods were packed beyond capacity. Gas lamps lit narrow streets where fog clung heavily to the air, blurring distance and sound. Factories poured smoke into the sky, while wealth and poverty existed side by side with little separation. For many, survival meant anonymity. People arrived, disappeared, and moved on without record. The Thames reflected this reality. It was a place where waste was discarded and problems quietly removed. Against this backdrop, the discovery of human remains did not immediately provoke panic. At first, it seemed like another grim consequence of life in a crowded, indifferent city. In the autumn of 1887, workers along the Thames embankment made a discovery that unsettled even seasoned investigators. Wrapped in cloth and partially concealed was the torso of a woman. There was no head, no arms, and no legs. Medical examination quickly revealed that the dismemberment was not random. The cuts were clean and deliberate, suggesting control rather than frenzy. The woman appeared healthy and well-nourished, indicating she had not lived in extreme poverty. Yet no one came forward to identify her. No missing person report matched her description. Without a name or context, the investigation stalled almost immediately. Police hoped the case was an isolated incident, something tragic but rare. Months later, another torso was discovered. Once again, the remains belonged to a woman, and once again, the head and limbs were missing. The similarities were impossible to dismiss. This was no accident and no single act of desperation. Someone was repeating a method. Victorian investigators lacked the modern concept of serial behavior, but they understood patterns. Each discovery raised the same questions and offered the same lack of answers. Where were the missing parts? Who were the victims? And how was someone able to commit these acts repeatedly without being seen? The realization slowly set in that London was facing something it did not yet know how to name. As examinations continued, the consistency became more troubling. Joints were separated with care, and internal organs were removed deliberately. This was not reckless violence. It suggested anatomical knowledge and familiarity with the human body. The work required privacy, time, and a controlled environment. This was not done in alleyways or along the riverbank. The dismemberment happened elsewhere, behind closed doors. The Thames was not the crime scene. It was the final step in a process, used to erase connections and scatter evidence. Whoever was responsible understood not only how to cut a body apart, but how to make it disappear. As more remains surfaced, unease spread quietly through the city. Newspapers reported the discoveries cautiously, avoiding sensational language. But fear does not require headlines to grow. Rumors moved through markets, boarding houses, and riverside neighborhoods. Women became more cautious after dark, especially near the water. Despite increased attention, police made no arrests. The river continued to confuse timelines and destroy evidence. Some remains appeared quickly, others months later, and many were never recovered at all. Without identifying features, the victims remained anonymous. They became records rather than people, and the investigation drifted without direction. In 1888, London's attention was captured by another series of murders. In Whitechapel, women were being killed violently in public spaces. The press gave the killer a name, Jack the Ripper. The timing invited speculation. Some believed the Torso Murders and the Whitechapel killings were connected, but the methods told a different story. Jack the Ripper killed openly and left his victims where they fell. The Torso Killer worked in secrecy, with patience and concealment. Though history would often link the two, evidence never supported a connection. The comparison ultimately distracted from an already faltering investigation. Despite continued speculation, the discoveries eventually slowed. No suspect was ever identified, and no clear motive emerged. Victorian investigators faced limitations they could not overcome. There was no DNA, no fingerprint databases, and record-keeping was inconsistent. As time passed, public attention shifted to new crimes and new fears. The Thames Torso Murders quietly faded from the headlines. What remained were unanswered questions and a collection of fragmented evidence. The victims' identities were never recovered, and their stories were never told. History preserved the mystery, but not the lives that were lost within it. Today, the River Thames continues to flow through London. Tourists walk its banks, and lights reflect across its surface. Few realize what it once carried, or what it concealed beneath the water. The Thames Torso Murders were never solved, and perhaps they never will be. Some crimes leave behind answers, others leave only silence, and the river, as it always has, keeps its secrets. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories like this, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your comments help shape what we cover next, so feel free to share your thoughts below. And as always, thank you for your time.